So let's take a look at the assignment for this week, assignment number 2. So this one works on a different feature of the application that we're going to be working throughout the semester, and uses JavaScript and jQuery. It does not yet work on the prototype HTML pages that we worked on last week. It leaves them all alone for a second, right? We'll come back to that in the third and fourth assignment. So on this second assignment, we use JavaScript and jQuery to talk to a middle tier to dynamically render some content. We're going to ask for some content from the middle tier, right? The middle tier is going to respond with an array of JSON objects, and then we're going to render that dynamically on the front end, right? Again, promoting the strategy that the content will be dynamically rendered on the front end as opposed to the back end. Okay. For back end rendering, there are other technologies that have been with us for quite a while. You know, certainly ASPs, JSPs, Python, Perl, PHP have been around for quite a while, and these technologies are certainly very mature. And we have borrowed a lot of the techniques that have become very popular in the middle tier. We have borrowed a lot of the same ideas, and we are now repackaging those same ideas, but now on the client side, right? Since they've proven very worthy on the server side, now they're making their way slowly pretty fast to the client side. So in this assignment, we're going to create a couple of tools that system administrators are going to need in the application. For instance, a system administrator is going to be able to list all the users in the system, listing their usernames, first name, last names, and roles, and they'll be able to filter them. So for instance, if they type something on the username, it'll filter out all the users that have that particular username or contain that username. Same thing for first name, last name, and whatnot. The list below lists all the users. Notice that there's no pagination. That would be a great idea. That would be perhaps could be a bonus. You know, adding pagination to this would be nice. It has also has controls on the right-hand side with X and pencil, hinting at the fact that you can either a system administrator could remove a user or can edit that user. To edit the user, they click on the pencil. The user information is copied on the form at the top, right? So that the administrator can then modify their username, modify their first, their last, or their role. The top form also has an OK sign on the right-hand side that allows you to accept the changes, or a plus that allows you to add a brand new user by providing some of the basic information at the top. Also, the search button or the search icon allows you to filter. So you could implement it two different ways. You can implement it as a type ahead, as you type, do a brand new query, or if you prefer, only do the query when you click on the search. Okay. So yeah, so this is the feature that we're going to add for this assignment. We also suggest a couple of files that are going to be required for implementing this. Notice that it follows the same naming convention that we introduced last week, where you have the first part of the file is the feature that we're building, then the role of this file in the application, whether it's a template providing some HTML template layout, or it's a style providing some look and feel for that particular file. And then we have also a component which is going to provide control mechanism, control behavior that's going to handle events as the user interacts with the user interface by clicking buttons or typing. They're going to be handled by this JavaScript. It's going to follow closely the model view controller design pattern, where the template and the styling are going to be handling the display and the view and rendering it for the user, whereas the component, that client.js is going to provide control mechanism, right? Handling all events that are generated from the front end and converting that into service calls to a middle tier, right? And handling any communication between the front end and the middle tier, and handling any data modeling, any data model transformations, and rendering it dynamically on the content. A couple other things. We have the user.model.client is going to be a simple JavaScript that represents a user on the client side. And the service is the one who's going to be responsible for any communication between the client side and the middle tier. So any HTTP calls, gets, puts, deletes, they're all going to be handled by the service. So it's following a fairly model view controller architecture, also by encapsulating any data manipulation in the service layer. Okay, so this is all on the client, and it's it'll be worth that many points. Each one of these deliverables has the points listed there. Let's see what else. Let's see. So here's an initial approximation of what the admin template might look like, where you have loading some of the scripts that we're going to need, loading the service layer, the service file that's going to handle all communication with the middle tier, the controller that's going to handle any events that are generated as we click and type at the template, and the styling. So these are all the dependencies of our user admin template. Then we give you some ideas on how you would go about laying out some of the front end. So for instance, here's a table using Bootstrap's table class, right? So that it already adds correct borders, a correct background, some fonts. Also, the first row in the heading, where it has some input fields for capturing username, password, first name, last name, and being able to either create new users or edit existing users. The last column displaying some of the icons using font awesome with the plus sign and the checkbox on the right hand side. Notice that they all have classes associated to each one of these elements. So web dev search, web dev create, web dev update. Notice that it's following a naming convention. All the classes or IDs that are part of this project, notice that they all have a 4-letter word appended to that class. This is to distinguish our classes that we know we created, right, from classes that are generated by other frameworks, right, by Font Awesome, or distinguish them from classes that are generated by Bootstrap. That's also a good practice, right? So whatever particular organization you might belong to or you might work for, right? They might typically come up with some acronym, right? That then you would then use to append in front of your classes, in front of your IDs, in front of any artifact that belongs to that particular organization, right? So it's very important to follow namespaces so that you can distinguish what's yours and what's not. We chose WebDev, WBDV, WebDev. Also notice that we name some of these input fields following also some naming convention. For instance, all input fields we appended FLD. Again, this is also whatever team you belong to that you're working together. The team will come up with some naming conventions across so that the source code has a consistent level of quality, right, in your team. What else? So searching for users describes the behavior. We have the template row. So this is what an individual user it would be rendered as, right? So each as what we're going to do. Yes.
Will we get points off if we don't append WebDev or like append field for all of our inputs and classes, like for the whole class? Just wanted to confirm.
Yes, you will follow some naming convention. If you have your own, then you're free to use your own naming convention. but there has to be some naming convention. If you don't have your own, then follow mine. Okay. So the question was whether it was compulsory to follow a naming convention, and yes, you have to follow a naming convention, either mine proposed here or your own if you've taken a co-op or from your previous professional experience. Yeah. So what we're going to do is that the data is going to live on the server. Right, the client is not going to have any data, so it's going to always go back to the server for any data, presumably exposed as an array of JSON objects, where each object represents a user in the system. So what the controller is going to do is going to use the service, the user admin service, to fetch the data from the server. Once it comes back from the server, the controller is going to iterate over this in an array, JSON array. And for each instance in the object is going to copy and paste this TR. It's going to copy and paste it and append it at the end of the table, right? And then populate each one of the elements. For instance, it's going to populate the username, the first name, the last name, the role, as it populates the DOM. Right? And we'll see how to do that. Later infrastructures such as React and Angular go one step further, right? Where here you'll be using jQuery, which jQuery makes it very, very easy to manipulate the DOM, but it'll still be manipulating the DOM by hand. We're gonna loop through this, and we're gonna generate each individual element, and we're gonna populate it all by hand. Once we get to React and Angular, such low-level manipulation of the DOM is going to be abstracted by additional layers of abstraction. So they'll, for instance, Angular will declare an attribute that basically iterates over an element, over an array or collection, and then does all this for us. So we will never have to do this by hand. So this will be the only opportunity that we'll have to do this by hand, just to get a feel for this, right? Once we do it by hand once you learn how to your multiplication tables, we will then give you the calculator, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Notice that all these the elements, the TR element has a class called WebDevTemplate. Okay. So the jQuery the JavaScript that is going to look at this and says, oh, let me go fetch the template so I can clone it, right? Every time that I'm going to copy and paste it and put it back into the DOM. And I'll need to populate the username in webdev-username. See that? And I'll have to populate the first name in webdev first name, and so on and so forth. So it knows which elements it'll need to populate as it iterates over the array of users. Okay. Also, knowing that this is a template, this template is only meant for copying, for cloning. It's not meant for display for the end user. Right? It's only a template, so it should be hidden, but it should be always there so that it can be grabbed and used as a means of copying and pasting this over and over. And it needs to be stored somewhere. Might as well leave it in the HTML. So this still asks you to follow good software engineering practices. Right, so any new feature that you start working, you should start a separate branch, do all your work within that branch, and then commit it back into master. Also, as you reach a particular milestone, you should commit and then keep working. Admin styling. Here we're giving you one particular look and feel. You're welcome to make it look prettier than this. Right? So if you're using some other library such as materials, or you're using Foundation or something else, you're welcome to make it look prettier. Yes?
Some places you use hyphenated ID names, whereas some places they're camel cased. So is there like a rule to it, or it's just like consistently we can use one of them?
So for class names, you should use hyphenated, and for IDs you could use either. IDs are unique, right? So as we'll see later, a lot of these names have automatic mappings to JavaScript templates or JavaScript variables or JavaScript constants that do the automatic mapping between the two. Yes?
Do we need to follow any convention for IDs, or like can we use whatever naming convention?
As long as you follow and you're consistent, sure. Yep. Okay, we'll look at that. Template, styling, user model. Here's a suggestion on creating a class out of plain old JavaScript. Today, the latest versions of JavaScript certainly already provide the abstractions of interfaces and classes and whatnot. This is just using just a plain old JavaScript, using just a function to instantiate instances of users. Also, here's a template for you to use to create the controller, the one who's going to be responsible for handling all the events that are generated by the user as they click, as they type. They're going to be generating a stream of events, right, as they interact with the user interface. We're going to create a couple of event handlers here that are then going to be handled by several event handlers listed here. So, for instance, create user is going to handle the plus sign, right? The delete user is going to handle the X, right next to each one of the rows. Update user will handle the checkbox. When you hit on the checkbox to update the user. Also notice that we have here some variables at the top: username field, password field, remove button, and so on and so forth. These are going to be variables that are going to be bound to their HTML counterpart in the HTML template. We're going to be using jQuery to get a hold of those objects on the HTML template, so that we can manipulate them from JavaScript. So we're going to get a hold of them. Notice that they have a naming convention. They have a $sign in front of them, just so that we remember that these are not just any variable. It's a variable that is holding a reference to some DOM element in the HTML template. Okay. Also, notice that we have a kind of weird function there that doesn't have any name. So we have some code embedded in some function, an anonymous function, a function that has no name. You see that? And also this function is then themselves is embedded in a parentheses with a function call at the very end. See that? So this is a self-invoking function that what it does is that it creates its own namespace, right? So that it does not litter the rest of the namespace in JavaScript. This is a good practice to counterpart the fact that JavaScript has a single namespace. Right? Whenever you load any libraries in JavaScript, there's only one namespace. Right? So if you load many libraries, you have the risk of collision, where one variable might opaque another variable, or some function might override some other function. And so we want to make sure we manage that in JavaScript. Today, using the newer versions of JavaScript, that's no longer the case, right? Since we have formal implementations of classes, of modules, of imports and export, right? That already handle these namespace mechanisms, right? But in plain old JavaScript, there is no such thing, right? So we have to build our own module mechanism and namespace mechanism, and this is one of the standard ways of doing it. This is a design pattern called the Efi Design Pattern. So immediately invoked function expressions, functions that automatically run themselves right away, and they create a self-contained namespace. Again, it's a best practice. So this is a description of each one of the functions and what they do, meaning that they'll handle creating a user, finding all the users, updating a user, and so on and so forth. Here's the client. This client here, this service. I'm sorry. This is a service. This service is going to encapsulate all the data manipulation. Right. So the controller is not going to be responsible for maintaining any data. Right. The controller's responsibility is just converting user interaction, right, to map it to some data manipulation. right? But it's not the controller who's going to do the manipulation. It'll be all that manipulation will be encapsulated in this admin user service client. So this will it's a class. It's exposing some of the functions in here that that are going to be responsible for manipulating the data. And actually, it's not going to be manipulated here either, right? It's only going to, this is going to kind of be like a proxy where all data communication will be handled here, right? It'll be the responsibility of this module to actually notify the server, hey server, delete that user or update that user or retrieve all the users or find a user giving an ID. So all data manipulation and server communication will be handled through here. Okay. So this is the description. Each one. So okay. So this deliverable is that this should be running on Heroku and AWS or AWS. Okay. Any questions? So this will be due next Wednesday at midnight, right? Okay. Yes. 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 Through the service. We'll just be using just fetch, JavaScript's fetch function, and we're using the underlying promise mechanism. Promises. It'll be stored in the middle tier in just an array of users for now. The following week we'll add data access through JPA. Okay. The middle tier will be the same middle tier we have now, which is the Java middle tier, right? Which we played around with for the first assignment, setting it up. Right now we're actually going to start using it. Okay. Yes.
So for committing your code, so are there points detected for that also in creating this and keep on committing in between and then merging back? So
For the first two assignments, no, but you should start getting into that from starting with the third assignment. Yes. The question was there a penalty of not committing and creating your own branches and following good software engineering practices? Yes.
on that note, what's a good practice? For example, with respect to the first assignment, is this what should we have been doing? Like create a branch for login and then work on the login page.
Yes.
Make small commits, incremental commits.
Yes. Yep.
Merge it in, commit it in the branch, merge the branch into the master.
Yep.
Pull out a branch again.
Exactly.
And so on and so
Yep. Typically, if you're working on a team, you would create a pull request and ask someone else to merge it and so on and so forth. But you don't have a team just yet. So in the assignments, no, don't do that. There's no pull request. But when you get to the project, yes, you would be expected to do that. Yes.
And for example, suppose after building 5 pages, we find we need to change something in the login page. So we can
Change to the login. Yeah. Check it out.
and then
Do work and then merge it back into master. Yep. Yes.
Larger projects, I think we might make a lot of branches. So is it okay that we just make the branches, I mean, as a good practice, and then we delete the branches that we don't really need? Say we
Yeah.
made a
Right. Exactly. Ideally, you would.
bug fix branch.
Right. Exactly.
At the end.
Yeah. Ideally.
We have to show that we've made a branch for this particular, to tackle this particular issue, and do we keep it around because that just makes a lot of branches in the larger project now?
Well, I mean, all the merges would be shown in your commit log, right? Yeah. So that's what we would be looking for. That in your commit logs you have all these creation of new branches, merging, and so on and so forth.
Alright.
Yep. Okay. All right. Awesome.